everyone. Whoa, look, I cannot believe that we are halfway through Content Summit. I hope you all had an amazing time. I have enjoyed all your sessions and learned something new. Now, for the next session, I am really, really excited to dive into community building with our first panel of the day, featuring the fantastic Karla, the Global Social Media Insights Manager at Booking.com, and Sally, the Senior Global Employer Brand Manager at Etsy, so that you can build engaged communities with your customers, employees, and future prospects. Hi, Karla and Sally. How are you both today?
Hi, I'm very good. I am a bit sick, but I hope you guys are not bothered by it.
Glad to be here. Thanks so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I am so excited to be joined by you both. And I'm even more excited the fact this is our first panel. We've just had presentations so far. So we're bringing something a little bit different to the session, which is open. So just as a reminder, the Q&A is open. The chat is open. So please keep popping in your questions. And without further ado, I'm going to kick off this session with our first question. So Sally, I'm going to direct this one to you first. Can you tell me a little bit about what shifts have you observed in the landscape of community building, and how has the definition evolved in recent years?
Absolutely. So I think when I specifically think about community building and how I've seen it pivot most recently is really in regards to the consumers and how hyper aware they are of what looks like marketing, what looks like advertisement, right? We're all super attuned to it at this point, particularly Gen Z. And so when we're thinking about developing content, honestly, it's always my preferred strategy to be forthcoming and genuine and transparent. But now we kind of have to, because they're going to call us on it if we don't. So that for me has been really pivotal. We've seen that evolve more and more every year. I think this was a fact 5 years ago. Today is even more so. So just ensuring that we're actually creating content people believe and that feels true to them is really the only way they're not going to scroll right past it.
I agree with that so much. I think authenticity is the key. And I think social media in particular has really empowered that movement even more, which actually leads me to Karla, because I think you've got so much to talk about when it comes to social media. I'd love to hear your input on that question.
Thank you. You're going to have to shut me off because I have a lot to say. But yeah, so basically what I've noticed in terms of evolution of how communities are built and how they progress and the evolution that they've gone through. Just to put it very simple, obviously, first, just with the creation of social media, which was non-existent as it is right now 15 years ago. So that changed a lot. And then how they evolve within the social media channels, because the social media channels are very different from each other. So, for example, the shift that we see now with, like, for example, from Facebook and Instagram to TikTok is like Facebook and Instagram was mostly to keep in touch with your already known physical communities. And then what you see with TikTok is you have a more niche community based on interest, and that you can literally reach globally. Obviously, you can also reach globally with other social media channels, but it changes a lot because now you are building communities based on interest and not on proximity. And that's what we're seeing pretty much coming stronger and stronger, and more niche communities. Communities that are just very much involved into a very specific topic, and they are the most engaged communities.
I love that. And I think what you're saying about the fact you can actually go by interests now rather than by, who is so important, because at the end of the day, that is why we're here today, right? Is to build communities and to learn how we could build communities together. So that leads me actually really nicely to the next question. In creating successful brand messaging for community building, what core elements or strategies have you found to be most impactful in fostering a loyal following?
Well,
yeah.
For me, sorry. So for me in social media, I think, and this is something that I have used in other speeches that I've made actually, but I stand by it and I will die on this hill. Like, be the brand and make sure to be the brand that has something to say, and not the brand that has to say something. So you have to keep the message that you're sending to your communities because it's relevant for them, not just because you want to belong to a conversation where you and your brand don't have a space. If you can explore new spaces, make sure that they align with your brand values and the people that you're trying to reach, but don't try to jump into just any other trend that you see happening out there just because you want to be cool.
I love that. I love that angle. Sally, what do you think, especially from an employer branding perspective?
Perfect. So plus one to what Karla said, absolutely agree with that sentiment. It's becoming more important than ever, given a lot of what we're seeing happening in the world that many of us have opinions on, but a brand doesn't necessarily have to say anything on or shouldn't say something on, right? Building from the employer brand side, and just to sort of preface a bit of that, my audience through employer brand is always going to be folks who are either current or future prospects for talent for joining Etsy. This also includes our admin, right? Our employees, creating content that's relevant to them. So when I think about creating loyalty and really ensuring that our messaging allows for community building, it's really about ensuring that what we put out there allows the people viewing it to see themselves in the material. Everything that we create should be genuine to what it is the lived experience of that person is. So with Etsy, that can sometimes be a little bit complicated, right? Because my audience is not only candidates and it's not only employees, it's also buyers and sellers. But if all the content I'm pushing out is for buyers and sellers, nobody who's coming to work at Etsy is actually going to see themselves in what it is that we're creating. So in order to build that loyalty, it's saying to them, I understand you're interested in the buyer and seller element of Etsy, but I also recognize that you're interested in understanding what your actual lived experience would be at this company and ensuring that the people that I include in what we're putting out are really a demonstration of that. An extra angle to that I'll add is a big mistake that I think people often make is they say, okay, cool, we want to present the people who work at the organization and create the things. Sometimes we focus only on leadership. It's of course who your PR team is typically most comfortable with, right? They know how to say what they're going to say. But if you only focus on leadership, what percentage of your company is actually leadership? You need to be integrating into the things that you're sharing with the world, the stories of your employees who are at every level, so that someone can see that content and say, that would be my experience, versus, that's the leader I'd roll up to, which is important, but not most aspects of your day-to-day.
For sure. And I love that. And I think that's a lot of the times people are scared to invest in anyone that's not a leader, but actually it's those people that end up in leadership roles eventually, right? Or at least you want them to end up in those leadership roles. So you need to show them that there's opportunities in your workforce, whether that's Etsy, booking.com, somewhere else, to do that, which is so important. So in that case, can you both elaborate on your strategies for cultivating brand advocates within online communities in your industry? So Sally, I'm actually really interested, based on the last question, how in your experience do you get employees more involved, and maybe different departments as well? Because I'm sure social media and marketing teams are quite happy to be in front of camera, but maybe not so much someone in your tech team, So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that from you.
Ooh, it's a pretty complicated question, to be completely honest with you. It involves like an enormous amount of mapping. The easier version I'll share with you is like you take into consideration what are the business needs, what are some of the big projects we're working on that we're particularly excited that we'll be rolling out to people that we want them to know are in the works, but then also hiring needs. What are roles that are going to be particularly difficult to hire for, or ones that we continue to hire for all the time, or the vast majority of our employee base is part of. You map all of those details to then like, all right, which departments are those? Which people would be great representations of that within those departments? How do we ensure that diversity is incorporated into this? Not just ethnicity, but think gender identity, think location, think working mode, like all of these different components you then take into consideration. And you work with leaders to identify not only like who would be comfortable in front of the camera, but who would this be a career opportunity for, right? Who might an opportunity in front of the camera speaking to their experience actually help propel the career of? So it's a lot of different elements that we really incorporate when we're thinking about this. But a big piece of this is we need the employees to be featured in order for the other employees to want to share it, right? So one good way to like really bring your people on board and help them feel compelled to share is they're seeing their friends on social, right? They're seeing their friends being celebrated, the work that they've developed sometimes together being celebrated, and that really encourages them to share. And a whole other element that's too much to go into on this call is educating folks on what it is they can share. People can often be a little worried about like, what am I allowed to say about work? So part of that is having like key champions who you point to, and yourself being one of them, to demonstrate what does it look like to show my experience in a way that is accurate, but also helps them with their own career. We want folks to do this so that folks can see they enjoy what they're doing, they're good at what they're doing, and they're comfortable being a brand advocate. It helps everyone propel their career, honestly. So it's helping them understand that, and then teaching them a way to do it that feels comfortable, and of course, giving them the assets.
I love that. I think, you've touched really well on actually building like an employer advocacy program where people actually do feel empowered and they have the tools, the information, but also they can actually see the results and be part of something, which is so amazing. The one thing as well that you've mentioned on, which I love, is it's kind of touching back to the first question actually, is it's about authenticity, because if your employees are seeing their friends and people like them, they will also want to be part of this and be involved in that community even more so, which is great. And Karla, I know you will have a very different angle on this because you more deal with consumers, so I'd love to hear a little bit more about you and how you do that.
Yeah, so obviously booking.com is a brand direct to consumer, and when it comes to social media and the communities that will advocate for our brand and promote love for our brand, sometimes it doesn't even have to be on your own social media channels. And this is where I want to touch upon the influencers. I know it's a word that has changed a lot in the last few years, but it's still something that it's very valuable for brands when it makes sense and when it makes sense for your audiences. What do I mean with this? For example, our mission at booking.com is make it easier for everyone to experience the world. So just going back to that, I don't know if you guys know, there's a guy called Charlie Rocket on TikTok, and he basically goes around giving wishes to people that need it, like that need stuff. So basically, we did an influencer activation with Charlie Rocket. For example, there is this little child. Everything is there in the US. This little child that it's almost blind, and he will go blind eventually. And his biggest dream is to go and be at the Great Wall of China. So we got in contact with Charlie, and basically through Booking.com we are sponsoring that trip. But all this content about giving this trip to the Great Wall of China to this child is through Charlie Rocket and his following and his communities and what people stand for when he is creating this content. So in that sense, and how that looks for our brand in social media, it's not only about what your brand has to say, but also what comes really to what your brand's mission is, your brand values, and who can help you to really put that forward. And in this case, it was Charlie Rocket, because we're helping everyone to experience the world as they want to see it, basically.
I love that. That is so beautiful. And I think it's about I'm not really, companies is not the right word, I guess, brands in this way, working together to achieve the same goal. And the amazing thing is not only to have you done good in the world, you've shared a very beautiful, positive message, but also you brought an audience together to build an even bigger community and shine light on both of your brands. So it really is a win-win situation, isn't it? I love that. In terms of the next question then, so, and I know you've already touched on this, but I like to poke the bear a little bit more, what approaches or types of content have you found most effective in cultivating and nurturing online communities? And how do you tailor content to resonate with different segments of your community? Maybe Karla, I'll start with you on this one and move on to Sally. Oh, bless you. You're okay. Maybe Sally, you can get us started. Give Karla a second.
On it. No worries.
You.
Of course. Sorry, Karla. So I know that I mentioned before a few aspects of like how do you find it most effective in cultivating the relationship already, but I've also mentioned that our audience, when we put anything out into the world on social in particular, it has to appeal to so many different audiences simultaneously. So in this moment, you have to tailor it to everybody who's going to see it, right? So we have to tailor it to buyers, sellers, our colleagues, future prospects, current prospects, and investors. Those are all people with really, really different needs and wants and like interests, right? So we always look at this content, say, I'll give you an example, right? If we share a seller story, that obviously appeals to investors, buyers, and sellers. Why does it matter to our employees? Why does it matter to prospects? We try to include, why does this matter to us? Why is this important to the work we do? Why does this drive us? Why are we passionate about it? Or we talk about a different update to the site that we're using. Then we're going to say, these are the teams that built it. Here's the work that went into developing this thing that's helping buyers and sellers in this way. So it's thinking through, who are all the eyes that are going to see it, and how can I craft this very short messaging to appeal to all of them and actually be relevant to all of them? Because if they don't, again, see themselves in it, they're not going to keep coming back. We're able to use other parts of our funnel, right? So that's just social, that's the blanket. Once we bring people in, for instance, people come to the careers page, they join what we call a talent community, then I know things like, what's your department of interest and expertise? What's your preferred working mode? What's your location? And then I can develop content that is very specific to those people. I can create pieces saying, okay, this person lives within 100 miles of a Brooklyn office. Their preferred work mode is flex or in office. So I'm going to generate content for them that shows the experiences we have together, the community that we're building. It's really using these different pieces, starting big, appealing to everyone. How can we possibly do that? And then the more we learn about them, tailoring the content so that they know this was directed at me and what it is that I was comfortable sharing with them.
Thank you so much. That was great. And I think it just shows that, I think community building, sometimes you get stuck in this impression it's all for social media and nothing else. That's just not the truth. It's all about your content strategy, the different areas of the funnel, and how you bring it all together to really build a story and build a picture that appeals to your audience and their needs, which could, obviously you've got an audience in mind, but they could differ a little bit depending on their maturity. or a lot, exactly. Karla, how are you feeling?
All good, all good. It was a hiccup, sorry.
Amazing. Oh, bless you. Well, if it's okay, I'll let you answer the question as well. Do you need me to repeat it? Or are you good?
No, I'm good. So I wanted to touch upon something that's probably a little bit nuanced, because obviously I'm currently working at Booking.com, and it's obviously a huge global company, and we do have access to certain tools and social agencies that help us do a lot of the work that we do. But in terms of how do we decide which content will be more relevant, or how can we talk to these communities, we use a lot of tools. First of all, social listening. So we have social listening in place with different tooling. So we learn what people are saying about our brand online. So we can listen not only to what people are reserving on Booking.com, but also what they're saying about the actual brand, and maybe we can tap into those conversations. And secondly, the other side of the ball is also tapping into the conversations that are happening currently in the social media space. So we do have an agency that keeps us updated and upfront of any trend on the travel industry. We keep tab of our competitors. We keep tab of all the other travel companies that are actually creating also amazing content on social, because we want to learn, we want to get inspired, and we also want to push and challenge ourselves to create better and greater things. So it's not only visualizing what we want to say, it's also what people want to hear and what the world is actually talking about. So those things, I do understand that it's nuanced to very big global companies that have access to resources, and but there are ways to do this also on a lower scale, on the lower scale of the size of a company, and also of the access to tooling as well.
Exactly. And I think nowadays it's about just being smart with which tools you pick, what matters to you, and figuring out exactly, where your audience is and doing that competitor analysis as well, which I love the fact you touched on that. It's not just about, finding out what your audience is doing, it's actually finding out what your competitors are up to, or not even your direct competitors, but companies that are in the same sort of area of work, because they're probably doing some really awesome stuff too. And you can really get inspired with that, which is awesome. So what metrics or KPIs do you guys find was valuable when you are measuring the success and the health, of course, of your community and the brand itself? Sally, maybe I'll start with you on this one.
Do you mind if we actually let Karla start? Because I know that she and I will have overlap, and then
Okay.
I'll tack on what's different
Sure.
about employer brand, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
So for us, it's mainly three things. First of all is engagements. Second is the positive sentiment under our own content, but also the positive sentiment on what people are talking about on our brand. And the third one is the share of voice. So basically, when we're participating on a bigger brand moment, for example, when all the travel brands are out there, for example, right now with Black Friday, how we measure the success of our strategies on social is with the share of voice about Black Friday, with all the travel companies putting out something out there out of Black Friday. And it's not just one metric that we look into. We always look at all of these and many others, but mainly all of these to measure how engaged our community. So the total amount of engagements also versus our competitors, the share of voice versus our competitors, and also the positive sentiment under our own content, but also over what people are saying of our brand on social.
Love that. Absolutely love that. And that makes sense to me. But Sally, I know there's an overlap, so I'm not going to talk anymore. I just want to hear what you've got to say.
So where we definitely have overlap will be the key metrics that we measure with any of our social, right? You're looking at engagement or engagement per impression, resharing, associated trends, right? A difference that I actually didn't realize Karla was going to say that I'll point out just for anybody building employer brand or doing employer brand. I learned really early that we couldn't actually compare our metrics to our key competitors. I don't know how many of you know this, but Etsy is actually really only about 2,000 employees. Our key competitors for talents are companies like Spotify, Meta, right? Like X. The metrics those companies will get will always surpass ours. So I learned really early, it was like, okay, don't focus too much on like the actual yield of likes or shares and more so on like engagement percentages. So I'll put that out there for anyone who's giving themselves a hard time. It's not worth it. Just focus more on like, is the content actually working at the level theirs is or better, and you'll be happy. But beyond the social metrics and beyond other things associated you think of like how is the newsletter performing in respect to clicks, pass-through rates for people like coming to the careers page and applying, those things are pretty straightforward, candidly. Where it gets a little bit stickier and unique with employer brand is that it isn't always going to be about quantity. I absolutely want like our level of followers to keep growing and growing and growing, but I actually do not want more people to keep applying and applying and applying. And the reason for that, and not all employer brand leaders will agree with me on this, is it's really not about quantity, it's about quality. And so a lot of the work that I want to look at isn't how many people visited my careers page or applied. It's more around pass-through rates. How many of these people who applied actually made it to an interview or made it to a late stage interview or made it to an offer? Those things are a lot more valuable. And how are those metrics impacted by them receiving messaging from me? Are the people who applied after receiving my newsletters more likely to be hired? By the way, they are by 400%, just as a heads up. So it really does make a very big difference. You look at those sorts of metrics versus quantity. And then another thing we really look into to assess, like, are we actually doing things the right way? Is I look into, of course, like surveys internally, right? When someone reaches the 90-day mark after being hired, they're actually asked, is the material that you were introduced to before and during your interview process reflective of what you learned from conversations and true to the experience you've since had at this organization? If the answer is ever no and how, it means I need to adjust my strategy. I do the same for engagement survey results. If something is showing we're not doing well that we used to, I stop creating that content. It needs to be accurate. So these are other indicators of, are we being true to our community? Are we serving them what they need? We use that to adjust all the time.
I love that. And that actually brings me super nicely to the next question, which is also our last questions before the Q&A. As community dynamics constantly evolve, how do you maintain relevance and adapt your strategies to meet the changing needs and preferences of your community members? Karla, I'd love to hear from you on this one.
For me, I think it's actually already kind of said. We do listen to our communities. We listen to what they want to hear, with what's relevant and what's going on in the world. And yeah, obviously, we do have certain messaging that we have to convey, that it comes from the business side. So we do have messaging that it's required to get out there to position certain products or certain things that we want to push. But how do we do it? It's really just listening to what people need to hear. So if I have a Black Friday messaging, but the people are actually looking forward to travel more sustainable, and I just want them to reserve something that's not sustainable, then it doesn't match. So it's literally just listening to what the communities need at that moment from you, and finding that match to the message that you need to say as a company, and being very critical about it. Like, if it didn't work, then it didn't work, but we're not gonna do that again, and we will have reasons and insights why. And I think it's just that it's literally a constant feedback of what you put out there, what's the response from the communities, and what will you put out there the next time.
Exactly. Exactly. At the end of the day, I think what I've personally learned today is listen to your customers, listen to your employees, listen to even your competitors, and learn from them
Absolutely.
and connect with them. Amazing. Thank you so much. So I think it's time for the Q&A. And I've got one question here, which I can see it's been upvoted. So I'm going to use this one first. Biggest recommendations for doing a rebrand. What platforms are most important to invest in, and what's going to have the most reach impact? Karla, I'm going to give you this one because I think it's super relevant to you.
I think the common mistake that we do when we think social media is, where should we as a brand be on social media? Or why don't we have a Threads profile open yet? Or why don't we have a TikTok just yet? And it's taking a step back and it's thinking, where are the people that I want to reach? Are they on Facebook? Are they on WhatsApp? Because that's a social media channel. Are they on TikTok? Are they on Twitch? Are they gamers? Do I want to get these gamers to work for me or to buy some travel promo that I'm selling? So it's not about we should be on every social media channel, or oh my god, a new social media channel, we should just jump into it because we cannot be left out of it. Is, where are these people? Who are they? And where are you going to reach them? And then talk to them in the language they want to be talked on. And I think it's just a matter of stepping back instead of just jumping ahead to every single thing that comes up in this super fast-paced world.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I love the fact as well. We actually had a presentation by Hootsuite earlier, and they said exactly the same as you, which just shows how relevant that answer is, which is amazing. Sally, question for you now. What piece of advice do you have for strengthening your employer branding when a company has gone from a small knit community feel to a global business? We now have employees all over the world, and many of our longer tenured employees miss what our company once was when it was smaller.
Yeah. So much of that is honestly listening tour, right? If you're hearing that people are missing what it was, it's worth really hearing that story and telling that story in addition to telling the story of what it has become. And if you can, finding overlap. Often when someone feels what when someone misses what the small company feel was like, what they're really seeking is validation that that was real and that it was different. And sometimes an opportunity to tell the story of what it was and how it's evolved into what it is today. So utilize that opportunity to A, help them feel heard, B, identify how to share the story, and then again, create that connectivity of the old company has influenced the new company to be a certain way. How do you both lift one another up? And if you don't mind real quick, I want to add to the question that was upvoted around making employees feel comfortable, helping employees feel comfortable posting on social media. Part of it's just giving them the resources, like this answer was. Part of it's identifying champions. who are the people that are participating in these events already or these moments already, and actually tapping them to say, I'll help you craft a post. I would love for you to post about it. Let me help you learn how to do it. So part of it's like giving clear guidelines. Part of it's just tapping the champions who can then be a demonstration of how to do it themselves.
Exactly. I love that so much. Thank you so much, Bob, for joining us today. And this session was brilliant. And as always, we will share the recording with the audience after the day. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next session, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.